Hello my little loves, I'm here to do part 2 of my wrap up. I feel like generally speaking this second part is the section of 4 and 5 stars. I think it was like mixed emotions, just so for the first half for a few books, and like some 1 stars, 2 stars. But yeah, it got so much better, which I'm really happy about. So the first one, I am going to do a cop-out response because I have got a full dedicated review on the channel already, and that is for The Invocations by Crystal Sutherland. This one I absolutely adored. 5 stars. Definitely give that a check out if you are interested in more about what it is and my thoughts about it overall. The next book I read was kindly gifted to me by the published team at Henry Roy PR. I was on their book tour. As I mentioned in part 1, I was doing quite a few book tour posts, which I really enjoyed. I love that. I had a great time taking part in them. So this one is called Dirty Spirits by Sawney Hatton, and I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. And it's an offbeat occult ghost story where our main character's girlfriend falls back into her vicious cycle of addiction and kind of goes back to her ex-fiance's unusual family practices. This was such a whirlwind of emotion and adventure. I really enjoyed the sort of midsummer themes and tones of the story, especially when we got towards the climax and just how everything kind of kicked off and petered out. I wish we had more depth overall on the lore of the families found in patriarchs' beliefs, because we did touch on how the family got into this more intricate, unique occult feeling and how the rituals were kind of begun, but there wasn't a super, I feel, slick like link between what they learned from their predecessor and then the stuff they just chucked on top. So I think it could have been more neat and tightly wrapped up, just for my own curiosity's sake. But I do have some more information about that on my Instagram page if you are interested. That is Wolf House Storm. I listened to The Mermaid's Daughter by Anna Claycomb, and this was beautiful. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I listened to this via my library's audiobook service called BorrowBox, and this is basically a modern day expansion of the story of The Little Mermaid by Hans Christian Andersen. I think it's probably one of my favourite stories, actually one of my favourite classic fairy tales, even the darker one that's like peak storytelling. It is a tale of magic and the power of love as a descendant of the original mermaid fights the terrible price of saving herself from a curse that has affected generations of women in her family. The exploration and expansion of the classic tale through a bloodline curse was so well done. I feel like I read a couple of books actually this month that focused on bloodline curses, which I feel like is something I hadn't really touched on much beforehand. So it's quite nice to see how different, oh my little hamster's out, hello Autumn, how different the authors that I read and the stories that they were telling were portrayed. So I really enjoyed that, and I thought it was really well done in this. Harry is Kathleen's girlfriend, and honestly Harry was probably my favourite character. She just felt so much more genuinely likeable than Kathleen. I would say Kathleen's our main character, but Harry, you do have a lot of POVs from her as well. So it's kind of like, it's not split 50-50 dual perspective, I would say. There's a couple of POVs, but majority, I would say, is Kathleen. Yeah, just Kathleen honestly just felt kind of flippant in her responses. I did feel like she felt like it was all about her all the time, and I understand she's in a great deal of pain. Doctors can't help her because a lot of the things aren't actually physical, like she's got the stabbing sensation in her feet, her throat and tongue feels like it's like pain in her, but when she's having a physical medical examination you can't see traces of the pain that she's telling you about. So it must be awful. I empathise with that, but generally just her disposition as a person, she just took the people close to her that loved her for granted way too much, and I feel like that was really telling in her relationship with Harry, and that's probably why I didn't like her as much as Harry personally. One of the major things that really threw me off was in this story, everyone pretty much has understanding or knowledge of The Little Mermaid, the classic story, except for Kathleen, who seems to have been sheltered from it because I guess maybe the parents decided not to share it because it was too close to home, and as families, you know, maybe saw the connections more and more, they kind of wanted to shield it in the hopes that maybe it wouldn't manifest. But if everybody was generally aware, like if this is a story in our reality, Why were they so shocked and confused when they were noticing the parallels between what Kathleen was experiencing and all the sort of patterns of the mums in her family and the story of the Little Mermaid? Why was that such a shock, you know, when it was brought upon people that had been very familiar with the tale, like Harry, for example? It just didn't make sense to me that they would be so surprised. Like, yeah, I guess the element of magic and that would be shocking, but surely you wouldn't think, oh my God, shall we investigate more? How can it be like this story? No, you'd be like, that sounds eerily familiar to the Little Mermaid, you know? How interesting. Let's do a little bit of research. Like, oh my God, I can't believe it. Like, it wasn't until like the last couple of chapters, I feel, that people really started to think about the connections. Not last couple of chapters, that's an over exaggeration. It was well into the book before people started making the connections. And that's just something that really irks me, apparently. But moving on, aside from that, absolutely adored the story. Next up, I read a short story. This is actually a sample from a bigger collection, and this is Tabula Rasa by Caitlin Marceau. This is one of the publishing house Darklit's free horror library books, and Caitlin Marceau has actually now just taken over the indie horror publishing house, and so I'm looking forward to seeing this new destination and where they go in terms of how they run the business. So I'm excited to see what's in store. This one I gave a 4 out of 5 stars. It's from the wider collection of, I can never say it, Femina which I struggle to say greatly, but with this sample alone I thoroughly enjoyed it. The fear of a double slowly taking over everything that makes you you was absolutely terrifying, especially in such an enclosed space and you're trying to figure out why you're there in the first place, what's going on, what are you doing this for. You just know that you're in danger, like that primal animalistic fear of, oh my God, don't come near me. This, I loved that straight away I was just as confused as Cassie, who was our main character, our only character really, and I just wasn't sure what to believe. It lent to that trope that I do kind of enjoy if it's done well enough, of the unreliable narrative. You start to wonder why they're unreliable, what is the situation that we're in, who do we believe? And that is really what kind of ramped up this atmosphere and this tension from the get-go. Yeah, I just thought it was an incredibly impactful short story, and I'd definitely be up for trying the wider collection that it was sampled from. Following on from that, I read The Suicide Club by Rachel Heng. This was another 4 out of 5 stars read for me. This was a bit of blended reading. I had a stack of books that I borrowed out from the library, so I had the physical version on the go. I also used an Audible credit as well. So this is set in the near future New York, where lives last 300 years. And with the pursuit of immortality all-consuming within the whole of society, Leah must choose between her estranged father and her chance to live forever. Wow, this was far deeper than I was expecting. I mean, with a title like that, I thought, okay, it's going to have some interesting topics. I just hope it's going to be handled well. Not gonna lie, I did love the cover, and that's kind of why I picked it up, the cover and the name, but I thought, oh, it might be a bit YAE, not in like a negative way, but I just thought maybe the topic would be handled more like for a younger audience. And then when I got into the vibe that it was more dystopian, that kind of ricocheted that feeling. However, yes, it was dystopian in tone, but I feel like it was much more mature in its handling of the themes. It felt like an adult dystopian and very literary in a lot of the tones and themes of it as well. I felt like the narrative was incredibly thought-provoking, and it was super unsettling to just consider a world so close to our time period now, like timelines, in which we were ever closer to this perfect hell. Yeah, that sounds amazing, but blended with AI, so closely linked, and how immortality just seems that much closer was quite frightening. It felt more of a cult-like mentality than the self-proclaimed cult of the Suicide Club, you know? When you break it down to the fact, it's people are being controlled. You're not allowed to pass away in ways that you would want to. You're being forced into living for these long years, like, despite what you want. So that's why the Suicide Club had been like arranged, so people can die naturally as they can, you know, on their own terms. And there was just so much communication, so much like food for thought that came up with everything. I feel like this would translate absolutely wonderfully to a short TV series. I would love if that was ever an opportunity. I think I would absolutely adore that. Adored how Leah's character just evolved over time as she began to wake up more and more to the societal restraints of her and people in general, and the strange politics of the workplace. The final book I read was another Henry Roy PR book tour book. So thank you again to them. This is The Shabti by Megara C. Lorenz, and I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. Can you flim-flam a ghost? 1934, former medium Dashiell Quick travels the country debunking spiritualism and making enemies of former colleagues and lovers along the way. During a demo, Professor Herman is convinced he has a genuinely haunted artifact and of course needs help from Dashiell. This was absolutely fantastic. I fully adored this book. It just felt like such a great balance between like a cozy mystery, a little bit of romance elements and high stakes all rolled in together, but the way it was intertwined between them was just the perfect ratio. Herman was my favorite character, I would say. He was just a scholarly cutie. He was adorable. I loved the way he'd go on like random little escapades of Egyptology conversation that nobody knew what he was going on about. It was so cute. I adored it. I talk a little bit more in depth about this again on my Instagram page, as well of course on my Storygraph and Goodreads if you're interested in more of the written format. But for now, that has been me with my final part of April's book wrap up. Do let me know what you've been reading and what your favourite for the month has been, and I will catch you in another video soon. Bye!